or a little bit of backstory about the work. So,
And I don't know. It looks like none of these folks were at our initial event
right.
or at the student. Lindsay, you were.
When was that?
It was in Twing in the ballroom. You would have remembered it.
Well, I didn't go.
Or Tink. I said Twing, but it was in Tink in the ballroom.
Hey, how are you?
Yes, my thought was to give more context to what the questions are,
Yeah.
because I'm interested in what the questions are, but I think they'll make more sense when I respond to them with a little backstory or something.
Yeah, so I just want to welcome you guys. This is our last R&R for the semester. I'm thankful that you're here, and I'll let you take it away, Donald. Thank you.
All right, so thanks everybody for coming and hanging out, talking and having a conversation. I feel like I have a whole lot of conversations about art and photography with my wife, with Allie, on a regular basis. So to be in a bigger conversation is always exciting for me. So how do I want to start this? I think what I'm gonna do is kind of catch people up to what's going on right now in the art world. And I don't know how many people are really following what's happening, but I think in the last few days, one of the what do we want to call them, philanthropists or something. I mean, I'm gonna call them a philanthropist. One of the administrative faces around the art world wrote an article talking about, generally speaking, talking about cigarette tax, send money, and the re-voting on it and all that kind of stuff. And this is initially is how Mark and I even met, because we were on this committee. And now it's time to revisit it and figure out another funding source for the art sector to see if this one will get renewed, the sin tax, or if they'll have to find dollars somewhere else. So my mind has been there because someone called me to interview me about this conversation within the last week. And when I get phone calls, I'm always interested in what made them call me. I'm usually feeling like I'm somebody who's telling people that there's no Santa Claus and the truth, and I figured out a way to just accept the fact that, there's no nice way to tell people that they stink. So, you just got to say it. So in this conversation, the young lady was fairly new to Cleveland. They'd been around about a year. And, she was asking questions about the committee. And she was asking questions about what the committee recommended the people who hold the money do in relationship to what this organization actually did. And I kind of had to tell her that, and I mean, Mark, tell me if you disagree. I'm like, I was the enigma I was the black sheep in the group, even though the group was made up to some extent of a bunch of black sheep. But I shared with her that I felt like as a group, we weren't ready to be in a conversation about race and racism, let alone give suggestions to an institution responsible for distributing some $300 million around race, equity, and inclusion, is what I said. And she was kind of startled by that. I said, shame on us for being a group of people not ready to be in a conversation about race and racism, knowing that we're going to be held accountable and responsible for what does or does not happen. And here it is, like 7 years later, people are calling us to interview us, to ask us conversations, because people are trying to get some bearings around art sector funding. Slight backstory, what I shared with her is I felt like I was one of the people who, around the whole conversation about art sector funding, was I had a lot of time in it prior to it blowing up in 2016, 2017. And she says, how? I said, well, I get a phone call from the organization who created the art sector funding source 10 years, 11 years prior, when I'm living in Jersey City, saying, is money coming down the pipeline, opportunities for artists like you? So I kind of was solicited 10 years prior. So when I look up now, it was 2023, and it's almost been 20 years with me in this conversation about art sector funding, and really close relationships, personal friendships with the people who kind of architected all this stuff in terms of the idea that Cleveland needed art sector funding. So the foundations in the city didn't struggle so much to support the initiatives by art institutions. And a property tax attempted to be passed in 2000, maybe 2005, 2006, that didn't get approved. And then what I learned to myself is I said, oh, homeowners vote. And then a sin tax gets pitched. And then I realized that cigarette smokers don't, right? And then in all of the research and digging, being a part of the committee, I'm starting to get numbers connected to my lived experience of exclusion and racism and institutional structural racism. And it's like, oh, okay, so the cigarette tax is made up of predominantly black and brown people in Cleveland, high percentage of it, some 60%. And then you learn that 92% go to 3 to 4 major institutions. So it's like, oh, the 8% is where the individual artists get a chance to compete, and that narrowly goes 61 white artists to maybe 8 or 9 artists of color. So then it's like, oh, the Black and Hispanic community is paying for the fellowships of white artists. And then the institutions that I've been affiliated with since I got to University Circle in 1989 by way of Severance Hall, Cleveland Museum of Art, Playhouse Square, those places that have a hard time getting the cigarette smokers to even come into the door retain 92% of the money and are never a part of any of these board meetings. I said all that to say that board meeting is happening right now. And somebody asked me if I wanted to go and kind of spook the room just to kind of go and hear the conversation. And we had a long conversation about how a lot of people who patron the arts in Cleveland, a lot of administration around the arts, how a lot of those people never go to the shows, they never go to the talks, they're never really in the neighborhood and projects and that sort of thing. It's almost like it's a huge community of people who benefit off the business of the art sector without actually even really having to participate, which is interesting to me. Just saying that now it's bubbling up again. That board, the first board meeting after it's hit Cleveland.com is happening right now, which is interesting to me. So 2016, when all this stuff kind of bubbled up, I get a phone call. Donald, you ever got the Workforce Fellowship? What's the fellowship? I said, no, I never got it. And they said, well, can you come and say that on stage? There was a big panel at the Maltz Museum. And I said, sure. I stopped applying for it because I started hearing the word submit differently in 2016. And I said, man, I really need to stop submitting. And I heard myself say it out loud, like, oh shit, why am I submitting? Like, it started making me uncomfortable. And then one of my favorite quotes from The Wire is, you can't lose if you don't play. So I was at the point in my creative career where I was realizing that everything that I had learned from following the path of becoming an artist since I got to University Circle as a 9-year-old took me in a direction to where that world, that community, that system would see me as a challenge, as a problem, as radical, as hard to work with, hard to deal with. And it was just so interesting to me, and it was really fucking with my perception, because I'm thinking I did what y'all taught me how to do, which is to become an artist. And ultimately to become an artist is I learned how to become myself. And to become myself meant I was learning how to think for myself, ask less questions, and share what it is that it's inside me to share. And now that I was no longer being perceived as the inner city kid going good, coming from, the southeast side of Cleveland, who wouldn't flip the tables over, who was going to do all of the homework, who graduate 13 years perfect attendance. Now I'm being perceived as the angry black man that people are only reading about, that seems not to really exist in the same way we learned that these men existed, right? So this is what's happening to me in 2016. Well, I realized that most of the people I was in conversation with, I didn't feel like were prepared to be in the conversation. And when I say prepared to be in the conversation, coming from a wide range of perspectives. Now, mind you, I'm coming from inner city Cleveland. I'm coming from the projects. I'm coming from good kid. I'm coming from everybody around me being in jail. I'm coming from single parent household. I'm coming from being invited over to dinner at the people who are orchestrating what's happening in the art world. I'm in conversations with black folks, listening to them complain about white folks. I'm in conversation with white folks, listening to them complain about black folks. I'm coming from a very wide perspective because somehow me and my journey as an artist has allowed me to kind of walk into any room and be able to engage and exchange information. So I felt like I had a very unique perspective that allowed me not to have a high expectation for what would happen once everybody got in these rooms and what the system would do and could it fix itself and is it time and all of these things. Well, in me feeling like my journey up until that point, from me moving back to Cleveland at 27, thinking that was going to be more creative for me to take the pictures that I didn't get a chance to take as a child, for me not to be extracted from my neighborhood and the city that I was brought up in and go all over the world and take my traumatized imagination and be comfortable going in any hood and documenting for organizations, where they own the rights to my photographs, they determine my career. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do all this kind of stuff in Cleveland. And I felt like I got to a very big benchmark or chapter marker at the point where I'm around all these meetings in conversations where I feel like people aren't prepared for the system not to be ready to fix itself at that moment, right? And I'm watching the kids at Harvey Rice Library pop willies. So all this stuff is happening at the same time where I'm like, okay, well, I really want to just continue to work on my work. So this organization A is not about to figure it out. Organization B is not about to figure it out. That guy retired. This person retired. Nobody took accountability. I'm going to take pictures of these kids popping willies, right? Because what's happening to me is I'm feeling like I'm learning how to be free, but I'm also recognizing that I'm trying to look for some kind of representation of what that even looks like. Because for me, at 36, I felt like I didn't really have an accurate representation of what freedom looked like. I felt like I was free, but the outside world and people around me are perceiving me or labeling me as anything but free. So that drew me to the bikes even more. That drew me to the Willie. That drew me to learning how to pop a Willie. That drew me to riding with the dirt bikes. In the back of the truck, chased by police, on pedal bike rides, chased by police. And what I'm experiencing as an artist, as a photographer, as a human being, is I feel like I'm witnessing freedom, like pure freedom. But I'm listening to the depiction of what I'm experiencing as reckless, as out of control, as dangerous, and all these other labels. But I'm realizing and I'm learning for myself, because I learned how to pop a willie at the beginning of me engaging with taking pictures of the kids popping willies, is I feel free. Like I feel alive. And something that got brought up when we were talking at the first event was how we talked about a whole lot of stuff, but nobody talked about the element of freedom in looking at the photographs. Now, for me, the bike itself symbolized freedom from the time I was 4 years old, and I could ride around the block. And I didn't have to have my mom start me off on the bike, and I was free to go around the block. And then I could ride to my cousin's house after I got old enough. So just the bike as a symbol of freedom and the element of freedom, and the Willie as a form of expression of freedom, is the part that I'm probably not saying the most. It's been easy for me to get caught up into the perception of what I'm doing, the perception of myself, people's depiction of myself, the people's depiction of my work, and having a conversation about that. I can have 100 conversations about ultimately any single thing that I'm making, because I can see most of the things that I'm making and experiencing from a very wide range of perspectives. So I want people to see pure freedom. And part of me feels like when I'm looking at the images and I'm looking at the work and I'm around the community of people popping willies, one, it's predominantly black men. So it comes with what groups of black men come with, which is an expression of anger and rage and violence. When I'm taking these pictures, I know these kids gonna get killed. When y'all looking at the shows and y'all looking at the work, young men getting killed. And it's not a whole lot that's carrying these conversations other than the news that half of us watch, the Cleveland Remembrance page that only half of the city watches, and there's no complementary conversations that are sharing a wider range of perspectives so we can really understand what's going on. I'm in a lot of conversations with people when they're saying, well, what they're doing is illegal. Why is it happening? I mean, part of me feels like ultimately I'm witnessing people have a reason or excuse or an invitation to openly speak about black men is what I feel like I'm experiencing most of the time. And it's easy for me to take it personal because I am a part of the group. I'm not a photojournalist. I wasn't paid to create the images. I don't have any other motive than to express myself with the group and to get an accurate depiction and representation of how I see myself. I read a couple little quick comments that were made in terms of the question board that we made for people. And one of them, which I imagine we'll read out loud, really challenged my perspective on, my ability to glorify something that's wrong, right? And in that comment, which I really want to see the whole comment, but it just really got me thinking to myself about how most of my work is a response to something. So when I'm creating these images, it has more to do with me capturing the reaction or the response or the filling some kind of void, some missing component or element to conversations more than anything. And it was interesting because it felt like, to me, it was easy to see what I'm doing as a way to glorify something wrong or something negative, when ultimately what I'm doing more than anything is trying to illuminate something that's not even a part of the conversation, that's not even happening. Like, what is this a reaction from? What is this a response to? Why am I attracted to the element or visual representation of freedom? Freedom from what? What's creating this? What is my life experience and what I'm attracted to? What is that a response to? Is something that I'm always thinking about. So we put the questions up in a way for people to leave comments and say what they thought, say what kind of triggered them, or give people an opportunity to engage in some kind of dialogue when they were looking at the images. So here's some of the questions. And then the other thing that I just want to share with everybody, just because it was a part of the experience at the first event, was it was a guy who kind of came, I guess I had a heckler where he wanted to probe or poke. And I mean, I don't know, to spare you the details of the conversation, it just very much turned into asking me about a bike shop and if I go to the bike shop, and I talked about having a negative experience, me and some of the young men that I ride bikes with, and he asked me, was I triggering? Was I being threatening? So it's just interesting to me, the whole language that is rooted in racism, that ultimately, I guess, people find themselves comfortable being able to say and using these words and using these terms, like, were you threatening? And then me feeling like ultimately I'm being poked at in a way where, I react or I respond in a certain kind of way. But I just feel like those kind of psychological games are weak, because I wouldn't have made it this far being who I am if I allowed myself to respond and react to kind of being poked to someone who's going to be able to say, I'm feeling uncomfortable, or, we're going to call the police and all that kind of stuff. Because I experienced that a lot, especially being somebody in Cleveland's creative community who's free. In a good conversation with a friend of mine, Carmen is always reminding me that part of what's happening to my lived experience as an artist in Cleveland is I'm in an environment where a lot of artists aren't free. A lot of people aren't free, generally speaking. So to be butted up against somebody who's free, it comes with a lot of backlash if you are the free thinking, independent thinker, kind of moving. I'm following like a universal path that isn't scripted out, and I'm making and changing as I need to, evolving as much as I need to, and trying to kind of motivate people to do the same thing. But it's come with all kinds of cost and prices. If I'm looking at the bike and the wheelies and the way the whole environment responds to the dirt bikes and the pedal bikes and popping wheelies and the police and the chief of police and the mayors and all this other stuff, it's an example. It's a small microcosm of the cost of freedom. I mean, in my opinion, when I'm around these guys, I'm realizing that we're all willing to risk our freedom just to express our freedom, right? And I feel like at some time period, in the real watered down way that they teach us the history of 60 years ago, that's kind of the sentiment that I get, is that people were willing to risk freedom in an effort to express freedom, which challenges me and causes me to look around oftentimes and think to myself, where is everybody else's rage and where is everybody else's violence? And for people who critique the person who's allowing themselves to really express themselves, I'm challenging people to show real representation of what expression really looks like. And it just seems like there's no rules on it. So it's refreshing to me to see people saying fuck the police and riding through all these major inner cities and saying, the city is lucky that I'm not out here killing people, that I'm not robbing people. Like, I'm trying to get whatever it is out of my system in a way that matches what's in my system, where I'm not bringing harm to anybody. And, the whole community of writers I'm around, I mean, we hear this said a lot, is if this was a group of white folks, then the response and the reaction would be different. So that's just something that kind of parallels from one situation expressing freedom to another, that depending on who you are and how you look and how you're brought up and the zip code you're born in and what side of town you're brought up on, when you are clearly expressing the need for something, there's supportive responses or not, or they're kind of constraining responses happening. So I'm gonna go through some of these questions. Did we write these questions down, or did we type them out, or?
We've not.
No?
We've not yet done that, no.
Anybody else seen them? Anybody else want to help me read some of these questions, and then we can kind of talk about a couple of them? But yeah, the one white guy from the bike shop, we had to kick him out. I was kind of glad that some people who would have been highly offended at what was happening hadn't gotten here yet. And then apparently, I guess at the end of it, it was somebody who was intimidated. It was some guy in here that was looked at as intimidating or something.
I wasn't here. So
Got you. So it's interesting to me that I guess from the conversations or the bikes or whatever, people use this as an opportunity to come in here and I guess kind of say something or disrupt, but they actually didn't really sit and exchange and say anything or disrupt ultimately. Anybody got a question that kind of bubbled up on one of those tickets? I just want to make sure we kind of,
It's a comment.
or a comment.
Comments to those questions.
Got you.
Mine's kind of I didn't write it, but this one has kind of a question on it. Do you want it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, it says, I hope you'll address the need to help boys grow into young men who channel their energy responsibly, not into forming gangs whose freedom of expression literally tramples on the well-being and safety of others. Let's not glorify gang activity and call it beautiful.
That's the comment I was talking about, because I think that kind of came in the email. I mean, it's,
gang activity.
huh?
Gang activity.
Right. And then it's like in my mind says, so what's a gang? You know what I'm saying? Like when I think of gangs and red and blue, I think Democrats and Republicans way before I ever think Bloods and Crips. Like I really do. So it's like, so what's the difference? It's you know what I mean? Like it's interesting because Angela Davis has a book, Are Prisons Obsolete? And one of the chapters in this book is just really talking about the country's ability to create the image of something. And that was just kind of mind blowing to me because it was taking something that was real complicated and making it easy, simple, and digestible, because the association to the word gang creates an image in most of our minds, and most of us see the same image or a similar image, and then either we identify or we don't identify with the image that we see in our mind, or we identify with what's been projected in front of us in terms of the association to the word. So for me, it's kind of hard to take some comments serious without being able to get to the root, because when it's like help boys, you know, what boys, you know what I'm saying, is what I ask myself. And it's kind of like the idea of people not being honest, transparent, direct, telling the truth. To me, it's kind of like say what you really mean. What boys? You talking about black little boys? You know, grow into young men. I don't know, it just come with a whole lot of connotations. That's why I kind of wish the comment side of this could have been discussion and conversation. But I also know that the person who wrote it might not say nothing in the room if they were in here with us. So it's just, like I said, it's a lot. It's beneficial to start to understand and hear a range of perspectives and perceptions. I mean, the strongest thing I think could ever happen to me as an artist was being critiqued, and being critiqued in a way where I couldn't respond. So I kind of was forced to have my own imagination kind of grapple with what's being said or seen or suggested. And then I kind of have found myself in having to juggle that. Any other comments kind of?
I thought of a theme here of a couple of them, and we heard this in the first session that we did from a couple people. So this one just says fun, you know, it says, what is it? Did it prompt you to reflect on their purpose and motive? I think that might be what the answer to this is. Fun and scary, and someone else wrote fun and danger. And then this longer one says, I have seen groups on the near west side by my house and find it exciting to watch from my porch. It's a little scary when I'm driving though. And then they add, the photographs are striking, definitely seem to capture the emotions of the writers. So I think the theme there, like, it's exciting and it's also scary, either for those people when they're driving, and potentially, like I think someone had said the last time, like my liability and responsibility as a driver, how safe are they being, and like what if someone were to fall and I'm driving behind them, that kind of thing. But then also finding it fun and exciting to watch.
Gotcha.
That's a theme that I'm seeing.
I mean, I think the expression of aggression is always fun, you know, because for me, that's kind of how I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. It's like I take in too much. If I'm moving through the city, if it's a lot of race-related suppression, if I'm in constant get-out moments, if I'm, what is it? We got get-out moments, but we also got microaggressions, and I'm experiencing this stuff, and I'm forced to suppress. It's kind of like I go home, and I'm like, I got to go pop a Willie. And I've noticed that in the last 7 years, like that's literally what I'm going to do in order to kind of shed off whatever is building up in me. Literally, it's the for me, I call it the expression for my aggression. But it's also interesting to me, the conversation about, is it safe, right? So it's kind of like safe for who, you know? And then I think about being a bike rider in a, you know, metropolitan city, and bike lanes and people getting hit by cars and that sort of thing. To me, I feel like what I've noticed is, for me riding up and down Euclid on 2 wheels versus me riding up and down Euclid on 1 wheel, people pay me more attention as a bike rider when I got the wheel in the air. So I feel safer on a bike in the street when I'm popping a wheelie, because I'm more confident that I'm being noticed on the bike. which is interesting to me. That's one. Then the other thing is if somebody fell and you're behind, you too close. If the bike rider is in danger, you know what I'm saying? Like the way we drive, if you can't see the car tires in front of you, you too close, because if they slam on their brake, you gonna hit them. I mean, I don't know. It's all of it is interesting to me. A lot of it to me is bullshit for real, but it's interesting to me listening to what people you choose to say to, I guess, represent or express whatever their worry or concern is. I mean, ultimately, I'm in a lot of conversations about helmets, and that's when I'm at, I'm a board member for Bike Cleveland, and when I'm in that demographic, if the people on these critical mass rides aren't cussing out black kids whose parents aren't around, they're sitting there talking to me about helmets. And then I'm sitting there saying, well, I didn't learn to ride a bike with a helmet. And to me, I guess in, 39 years of riding a pedal bike with no helmet, it feels like to me, it's kept me safe. Because ultimately, I'm not preparing to fall. I'm actually preparing myself more than anything not to fall. And then every situation that I know of somebody who's been in a major accident on a bike, they broke something that didn't have a helmet on. I mean, like literally, like really, really analyzing it and saying, people are saying to me, you never think you need to wear a helmet? Because I remember when I broke my collarbone, or I broke my wrist, or this person broke their leg, and I'm sitting there thinking like, what was the helmet gonna do to any of this stuff? Other than, to me, prepare you to fall. I mean, I look at people who teach their kids how to ride a bike, and I'm looking at the kids scared to ride the bike on training wheels, leaning halfway to the side, so they're not even learning the balance. They got on elbow pads, knee pads, and a helmet, and you trying to figure out why they scared to ride the bike. Versus strip the helmet, strip the elbow pads, strip the knee pads, and teach them how to straddle the bike and run with their legs and lift their feet up, because it's all about balance. So if you're not teaching them balance, you're preparing them to fall. Like literally. Popping a wheelie is all about balance. Like it's all about balance. It's so much about balance that you're in a constant state of the present moment just in order to sustain popping a wheelie. It's like you're literally not distracted. You're zeroed in. It's like an athlete being able to slow the football down, the basketball down. Time has slowed down. Your mind is clear. You're not thinking about any of all of the problems before you pick the wheel up. It's easy to see why young people, kids, whoever, are really, really attracted to popping a wheelie, coming from somebody. I couldn't pop a wheelie until 7 years ago. So I'm looking at what I'm carrying and my understanding of what I'm carrying and how many different creative outlets I have. And I'm thinking to myself like, oh, this is the perfect solution for most people, is to be able to clear your mind and pop a wheelie, because it's only a few things that I've done that feels like that level of freedom. I mean, and one of them is a jet ski in the middle of Lake Erie, at 50 miles an hour, screaming and crying at the top of my lungs and feeling safe. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, this is what it feels like to be alive. And it makes me ask myself, how many people are even moving around knowing what it feels like to be alive? Like, are we really alive? And are we experiencing it? And are we expressing it? Or are we holding it in and teaching everybody around us to hold it in? These are some of the questions that's always popping in my head.
Can I ask a follow-up question about it? I'm just, as I'm looking at these pictures behind you, the pedal bikes versus the dirt bikes. Obviously on a dirt bike you can go faster. That person could be going 35 miles an hour down the lane or something, popping a wheelie. Do you feel like there is any difference in your response to that, in terms of, and I think there's a picture where someone is, going, what would that be, left of center. I'm thinking about what other people, have kind of commented on, who I've told about this exhibit, like, well, what about when they're blowing through a stoplight? What about when they're going around a car on both sides and whatever? What would you say to some of that would your answer be any different with the dirt bikes as opposed to the pedal bikes, because the dirt bike has so much more power to it and can, can do a lot more on the road in terms of like intimidating drivers or being that like scary kind of force?
Well, I experience it as the same thing, right? I kind of look at it like high school basketball, college basketball, professional basketball. Like, I don't see it sectioned off in that way in terms of one versus the other, because I experience it as one whole community of people. And when I'm out, the response is the same from the pedal bike to the dirt bike is what I'm experiencing. So it makes me question, what's the intimidation factor? Like, is the bike and the wheelie really the intimidation factor? Is ultimately what I'm asking myself. And when I'm out dirt bike or pedal bike and people are yelling instructions in terms of staying organized in the group, moving as a group, when people are saying don't split the cars, pedal bike or dirt bike, it's coming from because we already know they're gonna fuck with us, right? So it's more of a don't do that because we're already, in the eyes of, authority, a disruption to that.
Like the driver is anticipating, oh, they're gonna stop short and make me have to split. They're anticipating something else happening when that's happening.
No, the police are gonna pull up on either one of the packs, pedal bike or dirt bike. So we don't want to split the car, ultimately, because the police are already they're gonna fuck with us if we don't split the car.
Oh, okay, I got you.
It's kind of like, giving them a reason. The way I experience the police is they're looking for reasons to engage, right? So now that you got people in cars who are intimidated, whether if we walked down the street, if we walked as a group and we split the car, who's ever intimidated is on the phone, right? So don't do these things that is going to give them a reason to engage in ways that they are already trained to engage in. My response definitely is still similar in terms of, one, it's kind of like I sit in the car and the dirt bikes go by. I sit in the car and the funeral procession goes by. I sit in the car and I'm more annoyed when the police go by, because the police seem to do whatever they want to do on the road. But I guess because they are the image of protection in a way that the country is good at creating the image of something, the law enforcer, then it's ignored. But when the image is constructed around you as the criminal, it's not ignored. And to a large extent, I say it's a response to something. So if somebody's sitting in the car and they call 911, or if they call in the mayor, or if they go into their councilman, in my opinion, the productive thing is, what are we going to do to fix whatever all these people and all these bikes are responding to? But that's not what's happening. What's happening is the response to the problem is the target. It's like when you're a kid, you got a big brother or a little brother, whichever one, a big sister or a little sister. It's the one that responds is the one that gets in trouble all the time. I can hit my little brother and then I can do like this. And then as soon as he hit me back, he in trouble. It's torture for the person who gets caught responding and reacting. And I feel like everybody can identify with that. And I feel like the demographic that I call the Panther demographic, because, I like to envision that nothing has changed and, we all reincarnated and we all been here before, and the civil rights is happening right now. It just looks different. What would this group of people be doing if we were sent back 60 years? The way I'm understanding it is it's predominantly black men from the age 10 to 50. It's like, oh, this is the Panther demographic. So crack and drugs and desegregation and all of the elements that were put into the neighborhoods did a really good job at figuring out how to shift the direction and the purpose of the demographic who was sitting on the project police buildings telling the police, you can't come in here. So if I know a guy that's 65 saying when he was 12, he was loading up the guns, trying to protect the projects from the police at 12, guess what? He's popping a wheelie down 116th now. Like literally. Like it's the same energy. It's the same demographic. It's probably the grandkids of these people, literally, who are the ones popping wheelies. So it's interesting to me because my response is always, it's a response to something. And I listen to people say, you know, that they've been to jail and been in trouble, and until they found the dirt bike, before they found the four-wheeler, they was getting in trouble. And since they found it, they ain't got no trouble because they was robbing and shooting and attempting to kill people and all this other stuff. And some of them seem to feel like if I'm not running around doing that, they should leave me alone. And I understand and I can identify with that perspective. Because ultimately, I mean, like my dad was somebody who had that perspective. Like, oh, I ain't fuck him up, son. I just smacked him a couple times. You know what I'm saying? Like, cause when you know what you're capable of and you are choosing not to do it, to some extent, you want everybody to have to accept the fact that I'm not doing what I could be doing. So can you leave me alone? You know what I'm saying? And then on the flip side, I'm somebody who feels like if I'm doing something that people feel like they wish I was doing something else, I accept all the consequences that come with it. And I feel like if somebody is running from the police on a pedal bike or a dirt bike, if somebody is going down the street at 40, 50 miles an hour on one wheel on the freeway, they've already accepted the ultimate consequence. And if you are interacting with somebody who has accepted the ultimate consequence, then you just need to sit at the light and let them go by. You know what I'm saying? Like you need to stop at the stop sign and let them go by. Like that's what I feel like I've learned from the environments that I've been a part of. And it don't matter whether it's University Circle in the museum or if it's Kinsman, Miles, Tarkington, Othway, 55th. I feel like the lesson has been the same. When people have accepted the ultimate consequence, get out of the way and let them go by. I don't know. Yeah. Thoughts, questions, comments? I mean, I can.
How has your photography helped or hurt?
How has it helped or hurt?
How has it?
Helped or hurt or?
Your ability to express freedom and to further.
Ultimately, photography has been the ultimate form of expression of freedom for me. I got introduced to the camera as by way of a Polaroid, my mom's Polaroid at 4. By 13, I'm in a dark room.
But specifically
These images here?
These images, yeah.
For me, it's become an extension of my expression of freedom. These images specifically. I think that's what we're all experiencing when we're looking at them. Whether the energy that they kind of conjure is being transformed or is being transmitted from me based on my perception of what I'm engaging with in terms of my subject as the pedal bike, dirt bike rider. Like I feel like fuck the police, right? And I feel like I have visual representation and illustrations of that feeling, those emotions. It's kind of like I was taught early how to, I'm gonna say, take pretty pictures. But I realized that I had much more to express than beauty. Go ahead.
So you're able to, through your photographs, go further. Otherwise, I would need to watch you outside doing this. But I can see in the room people on the sidelines who are enjoying what they're watching. The individuals who are riding the bikes are happy and having fun.
Yeah.
Photography gives you you can go beyond boundaries to show your feelings.
Right. Well, it's interesting because like I said, I was attached to the camera so early photography was my way to show my feelings, and it was limited. It was limited because the education environments that I was in were limiting them. I went out and continued to follow the camera, and it took me in a direction of being able to express myself in ways that I wasn't expressing myself, that a camera hasn't been capable of doing. So it's almost like it happened in reverse. I wasn't popping a willy when I was a kid. I had a camera taking pretty pictures. So I'm suppressing all of my anger, emotions, violence, hurt, pain, all this other stuff. So what happens is the more I was becoming myself as a person, as an artist, as a photographer, then I started to learn how to go and use the camera to help me express other emotions.
Can I follow up on that? Okay, this was when I became co-director of the Social Justice Institute, this was one of my goals to get you here. Can you say a little bit about being here at Case and what that's meant for you and what some of your expectations were, and particularly why you chose these photographs? And has it, this is the third session, has it done what you were hoping to do? And can you just kind of share what's behind some of the thinking of why you wanted to come to Case and why you wanted these photos to be shown here?
Biggest reason I wanted to come to Case is I've been coming down Fair Hill through the portal to one of the White Islands since I was a 9-year-old, and walked Case campus since a 4th grader, and walked through here and past here with some level of desire to show my work at the Cleveland Museum of Art, to showcase my work on Case campus, to showcase my work on Murray Hill, Mocha. Like I was kind of brought up through all of this, and I went off on a journey to become the artist that I've become, and I left this environment as a child. And on my return to the environment as an adult and as a Black man, I realized that I was no longer welcome in this environment. And I realized that I wasn't limited to only the Cleveland Museum of Art, because I realized that education institutions have seemed to support me as an artist and from being a child all the way up. So to be stopped by university police, right on Euclid in front of Case, on my walk to get water from Dome Brook, to do a pH balance test for my science class, it's a lot for me to be in Case to show my work. I was brought through as a child to Case, to the museum, and to be on the excluded side, to be on the outs of it all as an adult has been damaging. It's been a hard pill to swallow. So to be a part of the committee, and we met here on Case's campus, to come down here with kids on bikes, for me to be followed through the committee meeting by the police, it was like, I'm about to bring the bikes back down here in my mind, because ultimately I often feel like when I'm in these environments, I'm by myself, with the exception of the images that I bring in, right? That becomes my group, my representation, my demographic. For what I was hoping that it would do, I didn't have any expectations for what the experience would do. I recognize that I'm assuming that the response or the university's level of engagement to support an exhibition and the initiative that the Social Justice Institute have put forth may not have been extremely receptive. But that's just me outside looking in, looking at how long it took to find like a home for the conversations that we've been trying to have. So ultimately what the experience that I had has done and created, I usually don't get a chance to know. If people come through and people see the work, and if people are engaging with it or disengaging with it, then, the conversation is doing what the conversation will do.
Yeah, and I'd be curious what others think about this. I think your work, and what I found to be true with you being here is that you challenge the dominant narratives about a population, for example. And that's important to be disruptive in that way. But at a deeper level, I think you being here, and we talked about this when we had a student discussion last time, and I talked about this with my class as well, is that we're very much a research university. Some of us here do participatory research where we try to engage the community in a co-investigation process. And that's helpful, but it's still coming from the university. I see your work as emancipatory research, where you're doing the research from your perspective, from the community, and challenging the narrative about what is research, what is scholarship. And I think that's been really important for me to say, is to elevate your work as a place for us to learn as a community, and for us to really learn what it means to do this kind of research from a community perspective, as opposed to a university going into a community doing research on a community. So,
Gotcha.
So I think that's been really exciting to me, and your conversations, I think, have just deepened that. So it's in some ways exceeded my expectations of you being able to do that. But you have to be in that conversation. So I don't know if others would respond to that, but I think that's been really a liberating experience for me to have you here as a scholar.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I would just love to hop in. I just want to say that, like, I love your work, and I think it's, for me, just over the course of this conversation, it's kind of just brought to mind, like, all the kind of analogies and the strength of this metaphor of, like, using biking as a form of expression of freedom, and being able to, like you said, like, express that rage in a way that's not directly harming anyone, in a way that's that's giving people a community and a place to find common ground. And I just wanted to ask you about, you mentioned earlier, like, your kind of your development as an artist, and having those barriers of feeling like people weren't kind of supporting your, like, freedom as an artist. What are some ways you see some institutional changes or some social changes that you'd like to see to give artists more freedom? Is there some sort of initiative that you're kind of that you've thought of, or some sort of project you want to do to, like, encourage that kind of freedom, to, like, inspire artists to, like, have a similar, not a similar path, but to have their own way of expressing freedom?
That's institutional created?
I mean, to me, it's like, what comes to mind is, like, when you're talking about, like, supporting young artists, right? Like, giving them, or supporting artists in general, giving them, like, a platform to share their work, where their work actually gets seen and, like, critically appraised, or also giving them, financial support, some sort of stipend, so that they're not, time from, like, say, like, a 9-to-5 isn't, like, taking away time. They have more time to, like, pursue that artistic career. But it can be also just anything that you've maybe seen or thought about to, like, kind of support that freedom more, and, like, let people live.
So my mind went to, like, on the institutional side of it. I think the institutions are largely responsible for our depiction of, specifically artists. I feel like what I learned from going to college is that the professionals that kind of work in the universities seem to be who kind of control the art system, or the industry that they're in, right? And I feel like, so if people became more aware of the role that they're playing as gatekeepers, then maybe that would allow more freedom for artists and creative people. And I feel like a lot of times artists, we're doing whatever we need to do to make the work, pursue the dream, the passion. And I feel like oftentimes we are conforming in ways that we don't know. And I say that as somebody who was kicked out of my student shows my last 2 years of being in college as an artist, and very naive about it, because I thought I was doing what I was learning there, which was to express myself conceptually and technically. But I feel like the learn that I got from being kicked out of the shows was that I was doing something wrong. 20 years later, as an artist, I realized that everybody else was doing something wrong. If the goal is to be an artist, the goal is to be yourself, the goal is to express yourself, to figure out ways to express the parts of you that are inside and figuring out how to pull those out. I'm a firm believer that I don't know if the institutions or the system can fix itself without very specific pushback. I think I would have needed everybody in my class to really say something that was on their mind that they were scared to say, or scared to make an attempt to try to illustrate, in order for the experience to be different, right? I feel like institutions, universities, organizations, museums, I feel like they play a role in the experience that we're having, and that role has almost become their sole responsibility. But I would hold responsible and accountable the artists who engage more than anything. Like oftentimes when I'm in discussions and conversations with arts institutions or education institutions, and people are having a hard time in a conversation with me, I usually am thinking that it's the fault of all of the other people that they've been in conversation with, that this is so shocking or so uncomfortable. Because to me, college was amazing because I had dark rooms, computer labs, drawing classes. I had endless studios. And I felt like the rest was on me. The rest was my responsibility. I didn't really need it to do anything else. Like an artist connected to any kind of institution, any kind of place that's paying the bills, the lights, paying for the supplies, and providing whatever level of resource, in my opinion, the problem with those places is that the people interacting with it are succumbing to it and kind of saying, well, I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do. Versus, this is what I really want to do. This is what I was really thinking. I'm like, if creative people were trying to imagine the thing that's not happening and not being done, I feel like some level of balance would really take place. But I think it's a whole lot of people willing to say nothing. And then I guess what the places are doing, it seems like they're doing. They seem to believe that what they're doing is the right thing because they're doing what they know to do. With, not a whole lot of people like me coming and saying, what the fuck are you doing?
So I'm relatively new to this. I am new to this conversation, but is this like over now, or
This exhibition?
Right.
So you said his being here exceeded your expectations. So it seems like there should be a way for it to somehow this conversation or something should continue.
Yeah, my vision is to actually have community scholars in residence, so that there would actually be a way for us to have, and we've applied for funding for that and not gotten it, to actually create a position where somebody could be a scholar in residence, and there would be an ongoing, have access to studio space and all of those things. We haven't talked about this explicitly, but I think that you're right. This is just scratching the surface of what we can do.
I mean, ThinkBox is a resource for the community. I don't know if that's relevant to this conversation or not,
Right.
And does this mean you're not going to be comfortable walking in the Case campus after today, or what does this mean?
No, it means I've been uncomfortably walking through all of this my whole life. It's
Tomorrow will be no different.
yeah, no, tomorrow will be. It'll be. Well, the difference tomorrow is that I don't feel excluded in the ways that I've felt in the gap of me graduating from Cleveland School of the Arts, opting out of the Cleveland Institute of the Art, and then going on a trip to the East Coast and back. So now I don't feel as excluded. I feel a level of, or a sense of ownership of the space because my engagement is now current. So that's probably,
Positive.
yeah, that's probably the major difference.
First of all, thank you for displaying your work and coming and talking to us, and the discussions of this is inspiring. Dr. Chuck's question about you coming and displaying your work here made me wonder, have you displayed it at other places? And can you talk about that and maybe compare the reactions you've had at other places versus the reactions you've had here? And like, does it break down along certain lines, you know, racial lines, age lines? Is it older people and younger people have different responses? Or like, what can you tell us about that?
So, and you talking about this work specifically, or just
Or any of your work.
just kind of generally speaking? So, I don't know. I mean, I've been exhibiting my work since I was a sixth grader. I mean, I've probably been a part of a couple hundred exhibitions. So I guess I'll kind of go with me moving back to Cleveland, last 15 years of showing my work in the city. Depending on the environment, the environment usually creates the response. So if I'm at a university, then, you know, the world of academia is usually who I'm engaging with. So me being brought up in the world of, you know, showing my work at galleries, exhibitions, college galleries and college museums and that kind of circuit, I felt like my major audience wasn't represented in the audience most of the time. So that caused me to say, okay, how can I take my work? If I can say I'm doing this however I want to do it, then I'll go to, you know, a gallery with a bullet hole in the window to be in a different environment. So it's kind of like a social experiment that I kind of started, where I would just kind of say, I'm gonna have it here because I know who's gonna come here. And then I'll have it here because I know who's gonna come here. And very much the environment dictates the age, race, you know, demographic and that sort of thing. And the response is very much people seeing themselves reflected, or people seeing themselves, people having their perception challenged based on what their preconceived perception might have been to the people in the work. So it's a range. It's a very, very, very wide range. Some people love it, some people don't like it. And that isn't based on race. When people don't like it, it's kind of like either it's speaking to you and it's making you uncomfortable, or it's speaking to you and is making you comfortable, is what it seems like is happening with, generally speaking, with a lot of my work. You resonate, or you don't. You know, you don't like what's bubbled up, or you love what it's bubbling up. I mean, ultimately, all of us walking around with perceptions of our own, and whatever the images are doing to your individual perception creates the response and reaction. Yeah.
So I'm curious your perspective on, there's a dominant racialized stereotype around biking, right? So I think for a lot of people, when you picture a black individual on a bike, it may be this image of somebody popping a wheelie. When you picture a white person on a bike, it may be a super liberal person commuting to work, right? And so I'm curious if you think that we need to be working towards maybe merging these, or if there is a benefit of having these stereotypes around biking and how different populations engage with bikes, and I guess what we can do to make all forms of biking a little bit more accessible regardless of background.
Out of curiosity, what is the dominant stereotype?
I think I stated it. In my opinion, I think the dominant stereotype, you don't see white people popping wheelies.
Okay.
And you don't see as many African Americans or black people commuting to work on bikes. So that's the stereotypes that come to my mind, at least.
Got you.
Yeah.
Well, because it's interesting, because you called it the dominant, you called it the dominant stereotype.
Yep.
And it's the dominant stereotype for who?
Yeah.
You know? Because I didn't know people commuted to work on bikes. I knew people rode their bikes up and down Kinsman against traffic because they seemed to feel like it was safer.
Yeah.
And I've been on a bike for a long time, and people around me have been on bikes as a form of transportation, you know, not as a efficiency choice. And it was mind-blowing to me that it was a whole world of efficiency, energy efficient people commuting to work. Like it was. I'm like, oh, it's bike trails and everything. Like, do y'all know this? You know, like I'm like, I felt out of place riding to Newbridge to teach photography up and down Euclid.
So
But
that's exactly what I'm asking. Is there a benefit in changing that and letting certain populations know about bike trails and letting other people know that they can pop wheelies and things like that? Is there a benefit to merging this?
Well, I think I'm gonna go back to that discussion that I was in when we were talking about the money, and I think it might have been 10 or 11 of us all in the room. I don't believe that we were ready to all be in the room together, because when we're all in the room together, especially when we're talking about race and equity and inclusion in that specific situation, we have to be ready to have the conversation about race, equity, and inclusion when we get in the room together. I'm gonna call Euclid Bike Lane as the room together, right? Being a board member of Bike Cleveland and how I became a board member and my history with Bike Cleveland prior to me becoming a board member, I realized that us not all riding the bike down Euclid and knowing where all of the bike trails are is a point of leverage for organizations and money and funding and all that kind of stuff. Because like a lot of the institutions or sectors in the city, the dominant narrative is manipulating the bike riders riding against traffic coming up and down Kinsman. So, I mean, I think it's necessary. I don't know if I would say everybody would be comfortable with what the benefits are. Because it just seems like when we start riding up and down the same bike lane, we start talking about equity and money and funding and, you know, are we ready to be in that room, all in the same room? You know, I think people would benefit from knowing that as an organization that give you free inner tubes. And I find myself collecting the free inner tubes from that organization and giving it to the people that's around me, because I recognize that the people that I'm getting the inner tubes from aren't ready to be in the conversation with this dude who's been riding his bike probably for 50 years up and down Kinsman. You know, so it should be happening, but, you know, we ain't ready.
First of all, I want to say thank you, because I come from there, and it's organic to hear you flip it inside out and really tell, you know, the true story on what it's about, and actually expose the talent in the population. Like I said, it's raw, man. I appreciate it. I think a lot of people, because I see how it looks, you know. I enjoy it myself. I see how it may look just because a group of people that's together doing one thing don't make it a gang. Actually, gangsters don't even ride bikes. But I want to thank you for that. And the second thing, can you explain, because these are clean pictures. Are you on a bike? Are you running? Are you how are you getting this? Seriously. Like, how are you shooting that right there?
Trade secret.
Yeah,
So
I see.
all the above.
Oh man.
I'm experimenting. Each time I go out, I'm experimenting on how I'm shooting, because I'm looking at images of people riding bikes and popping wheelies, and the fact that I'm so connected to the camera, I'm always thinking about perspective. And I'm like, where was the camera at? So I'm looking through one photo shoot, and I can tell that I was on the back of a pickup truck because I'm a little higher than they are. But then if I want that wheel to look a little more exaggerated and be bigger, I need to be lower. So maybe I need to get in this car and come out of the T-top of this car, or sit out of the window, or let the back down of the pickup truck and then sit on the back. Call everybody and tell them I'm doing a photo shoot and let them pop wheelies behind me so I can get all the way on the ground. You know, so it's kind of like I'm using every opportunity to shoot as a way to experiment with the perspective and to start to create some serious variation in the images.
So how much talent, like, cause I sit to the red light sometimes.
It's all talent.
I see 5-year-old with a bike that don't even look like he need help to get on.
The amount of skill that it takes to ride the bike like this is unspeakable. Coming from somebody who was like, I couldn't do this as a kid, so they must got the cheat code.
I've been trying all my life.
So look, I'm like, so what's the cheat code? So I'm looking at the bikes. I'm like, oh, he got a low air in his tire. That's why he can keep that wheel up like that. So I'm like, what's the cheat code? What are they doing? So then when I'm like getting them to teach me, I'm realizing that when I'm looking at, and it was around the time I really first got on Instagram, right? So I'm looking at other cities and I'm looking at they bike and Bikelife, and I'm looking at the bikes that they got, and I'm noticing that it's like a pair of Michael Jordans in terms of basketball with the bikes. And I'm like, man, we don't got none of them bikes that all these people in these other cities is riding. It's a BMX, but it's a 29-inch BMX. So it's like a BMX bike, but it like got mountain bike tires on it. So I'm like, okay, so I already know what I'm gonna do. One, I'm gonna create a logo. So I created the logo for Cleveland Bike Life. And somebody coming out of the Justice Center who was mad took a sticker that I made, smacked it on the back of a Cleveland police car. It got 50,000 views, but mind you, I'm brand new to Instagram. So one of my little young dudes called me like, DBlack is going viral. And I'm like, what's viral? You know what I'm saying? Like how do you know? So I go to the post and I'm watching these numbers move. And they moving in real time, and the numbers is moving like ants. And it's like chilling. I'm like, oh, this is viral. That's crazy. So I'm gonna create a logo, and I'm gonna create T-shirts, and I'm gonna contribute to this whole demographic and world that I want to be able to pop a wheelie. So I seen the bikes that all of the kids was riding out of town. I'm like, well, if I buy one of the bikes that the kids out of town riding, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create the trend of us starting to get these bikes. I'm gonna take pictures. I'm gonna go to Neighborhood Connection. I'm gonna buy a classroom set of these $800 bikes. Like, this was the whole plan. So that's what I started doing. When I'm telling you, I got 20 kids coming over my house and they could all wheelie, and I'm sitting there first thinking, oh yeah, what's the cheat code? And then it's like, oh, there is no cheat. The cheat code is learning how to find balance and controlling your balance based on your rear brake and your pedal. So the pedal is the acceleration that gets the bike up in the air. The rear brake is the thing that saves you from falling back. So watching all of them master that is amazing. And then realizing that for every trick you might see them doing is weeks and weeks of practicing one particular balance point. Every trick is made up of a different balance point. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you picture a pair of scissors, right? The pair of scissors represent the rider on the bike. And depending on where the front wheel is, your body got to counterbalance it. And you literally practice your trick based on being able to figure out where your body is supposed to be positioned in order to create the counterbalance. And you just get addicted to grabbing the trigger. And it's the same thing with a dirt bike. The acceleration versus the back brake falling backwards. So when these kids getting in trouble in school, they got teachers calling home and all that, I'm watching what they want to practice. I'm watching what they don't mind doing over and over and over and over and over and over again. My whole thing was I'm gonna pop a wheelie every day until I could wheelie. And that's what I did probably for about 3 years straight. I took how I approach making art, which is practice until I'm very, very good. And I just laid that on top of the wheelie. And then some of the kids like close in my neighborhood, they was learning how to wheelie with me. And the one thing I didn't say is when I was growing up, my mom took us to all of the amusement parks and all of the water parks and all of the trips and all of the stuff we did. My mother was the person that facilitated it. Well, when I got older, what I learned is all of the people that I went on these trips with, and I can easily say it's about 50 people, most of them only went on a few trips. I was the one that went on 50 trips. I was the one that collected all of the memories of all of the experiences, and the people around me were holding on to the one they might have had. So part of what I'm doing when I'm shooting with the camera and kind of staying away from being led by money with the camera is creating the memories that are going to be significant to the people who are participating forever. Like I already know that nobody's ever going to forget any of the things that we are doing as a group at all. Like I know it because this is kind of like my second time to be able to experience it. So part of the motivation is capturing not just the picture on the day of when you did something special that you was gonna remember for the rest of your life, but actually capturing in real time what the experience kind of looked like and what the experience felt like. Like in my mind, every Halloween, every Easter, we as a group creating memories that these little boys ain't gonna never forget. And it don't matter if it rained the whole trip and we got pizza and caught flats, or if we ran from Shaker Police, Warrensville Police, Cleveland Police, all at the same time for 45 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, as a group, we ain't gonna never forget this stuff. And I just feel like that's important. Like the holding on to memories of special experiences is to me one of the most important things we can do, no matter what people outside of it think about it.
Do we have time for one more?
I have a quick comment. I'm hearing so much poetry in what you're saying about finding balance and spending weeks and weeks trying and falling probably and getting back up, and there's just like something so beautiful and so symbolic about what you're saying.
We named our nonprofit Balance Point. the point between falling forward and falling backwards.
Yeah.
And just the whole message is if you gotta fall forward. Tap that brake. I appreciate
That's a great
it.
way to end, and I thank you for your comments. I think one of the things that challenged the narrative for many people is who might have been afraid or scared, as some of the comments meant, is that when you look at these pictures, you can't escape the skill. It's so prevalent in the images and the sense of community and belonging. And so I think that's really, really powerful. And I love the balance point and fall forward. So fall forward. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.